I do want to thank you for this, what's been a privilege for me to get to learn about your organization and your history, and to pull some things together tonight in the form of a story, so we can kind of all be on the same page about where did this all come from. And that's the real purpose of my visit here, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Gennesaret Free Clinic. That deserves a round of applause right there. Well, I'm a storyteller, so let me start like this. Long ago, in a palace, there was a king and his advisor. They were sitting there on the window ledge, looking out on the streets below, seeing their kingdom as it stretched out before them. They were eating crackers, and they were putting honey on those crackers and taking little bits, little nibbles. And the king inadvertently, he spilled some of that honey. It dropped to the ledge of the window. It rolled over the ledge. It flew all the way down several stories below, and it hit the dusty road, hit the ground. And his advisor said, "Your Majesty, I noticed you dropped some honey. Do you think we should go and clean it up?" No, I'm the king. I don't do this. Someone else will clean that up. Now, as soon as the honey struck the ground, a lizard ran right out to eat that honey. Moments later, a cat rushed out and pounced on the lizard, and then there was a dog, and they were fighting. The two animals were fighting back and forth, and the advisor said, "Your Majesty, I noticed there's a commotion down in the street. Perhaps we should go down and break this up." No, I'm the king. I don't do this kind of thing. Somebody else will take care of this little mess. Sure enough, the owner of the cat showed up, and the owner of the dog showed up. And they began to pull their animals apart, and then they began to argue about whose animal was at fault. And the two of them got louder and louder. The advisor said, "Your Majesty, there's a couple of men down in the street. They're having an argument. Should we go down? Should we intervene?" No, I'm the king. I don't bother with such things like this. Somebody else will take care of this. Well, a crowd gathered, and some were friends with the cat owner, and some were friends with the dog owner. And they began to goad the two men on, and soon it came to fisticuffs. They were fighting, and then the entire crowd began to jump in, and it was a melee. And the advisor said, "Your Majesty, there's quite a commotion in the street now. I feel certain we should go down there and intervene." No. I am the king. Someone else will take care of this. See, there are my guards even now. Indeed, the palace guards arrived, and half of them knew the cat owner, and half of them knew the dog owner, and soon the guards were at it. We don't know how, but fire entered the equation, and soon flame was everywhere. That night, the king, on a distant hillside with his advisor, looked back from on high at that valley and the smoking ruins of what was once his palace. And he said to his advisor, maybe it was our business. Do you know, in 1988, in the city of Indianapolis, plenty of people had the same attitude as the king in that simple little Burmese folktale. And isn't it easy to have that attitude? Just to glance at those who are less fortunate than us and just drive right on by. To rest comfortable in the assumption that someone else will clean up the mess. Someone else will take responsibility. People need to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, after all. But friends, it is hard to pull yourself up by the bootstraps when you don't own any boots. Now, I could tell you about how your organization aids thousands of homeless each year, how Gennesaret provides hundreds of articles of clothing and toothpaste and toothbrushes, shampoo, and these are items most people take for granted in daily life, and how you get them to indigent people around our city, how dental care is given to huge numbers of people who urgently need it and who aren't likely to get it any other way. I could tell you how the Gennesaret Health Recovery Program makes sure that people who need recovery time after an operation and I was appalled to think about this, aren't just taken out of the hospital, put into a taxi, and when the taxi driver says, "Where do I go?" the answer doesn't come back, "Just take them downtown and let them out on the street somewhere." I can tell you that, but you know all that already. And those are the reasons, some of the good work Gennesaret does, why you are attracted to this organization, why you give your time or your talent or your resources. Making a clean sweep. But no. What I want to tell you, these 20 years on, 20 years after the founding of this organization, is how and why, as I understand it, Gennesaret came into being. Because none of this good work that your organization does in this community, none of it had to happen. It might not have happened at all. It's like the king in the folktale. It's very easy to look at the sea of human troubles in the community around us and just say, you know, that's somebody else's business. But it didn't happen that way. And it didn't happen that way for a very specific set of reasons. There's a Chinese proverb. It says, one dog barks because he sees something, 100 dogs bark because the first dog barked. You need to know why the first dog barked. You who support and fund and carry on this work need to know this story, because this is your story. This is your origin story. Every distinct people, every culture, every religion has an origin story. Families have them. We don't want to hear them when we're kids, do we? We don't care. We're too busy. But later, we want to get Uncle Jack and Aunt Ruth sitting down and say, what happened? How did it start? Well, every organization has a story too, and this is yours. So, here we go. Folks, how does stories start?
Once upon a time.
I love a bright audience. A prevalent mantra of the day, once upon a time, in the 1980s, can be summed up as me, 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 me. Greed, we were told, was a good thing. It was a good time to be a bond trader. A rising tide would lift all boats. As usual, it was a bad time to be poor and homeless, since a rising tide is of very little help to someone who does not own a boat. But there were facilities to deal with those people, weren't there? One could get on with one's life without having to think of the indigent members in our town. They needn't intrude on one's daily routine. They could easily remain invisible. It was just like the border guard who for years and years searched every day the load of hay that an old man brought across the border on his donkey, on his donkey's back. He looked in the donkey's tail, he looked in his mouth, in his mane, through the hay. He knew that old man was smuggling something, and he could not figure out what was he smuggling. Couldn't figure it out. Years went by, and finally the border guard retired. One day, he met the old man in the marketplace. And he said, look, I'm retired. Nothing's going to happen. I've always wondered, and I could never I know you were smuggling. I know you were smuggling something. What were you smuggling? The old man smiled. They looked at him. He said, donkeys.